They thought she was just the forgotten daughter who came back for money. They thought she was weak, alone, and desperate. They didn't know she commanded power in places no law could reach. They didn't know the people who crushed her father were already marked for destruction. And they definitely didn't know that touching her little brother would ignite a war that would erase empires. Her name was Sable Hartwell. And this was the day the powerful learned fear. Sable stepped out of the private terminal into cold evening air, her long black coat catching the wind like a shadow unfolding. The city skyline burned gold and steel in the distance, a kingdom built on money, blood, and lies. A man in a plain suit held up a tablet with her name, Sable Hartwell. He swallowed hard when she approached. "Miss Hartwell," he said, voice careful. "I'm Elias. I was asked to brief you." She glanced past him at the waiting car. "Brief me." "After you left, Garrick Hartwell remarried. He had 2 sons. The younger one, Bowden, insisted on picking you up personally." Sable's eyes narrowed. A 5-year-old insisted. Elias nodded. "He's attached to the idea of you." "And the older son?" she asked. Elias hesitated. "Rook Hartwell. He's difficult, spoiled, reckless, parties, gambling." A small luxury car rolled forward. The back door burst open before the driver could react. Bowden popped up from behind the tinted window like a jack-in-the-box. Face pressed to the glass, eyes huge. When the door opened, he climbed out, barely reaching her waist. His hair was messy. His eyes were bright. "You're here," he shouted, then suddenly remembered he was supposed to be tough. He cleared his throat, stood tall, and offered a hand like a miniature businessman. "Hi, I'm Bowden Hartwell. I'm 5. I'm in charge of welcoming you." Sable stared at his hand. Bowden's fingers shook, but he didn't drop the pose. Sable didn't take the hand. Instead, she crouched to eye level. "You're not scared," she said. Bowden blinked. "Should I be?" Sable's gaze flicked to the mansion in the distance, visible even from the road like a crown of stone. "Most people are," she said. Bowden leaned closer, whispering like it was a secret. "Mom said you came back for the fortune." Sable raised an eyebrow. "And you?" "I don't care about money," he said simply. "Dad said family should stick together, even if we don't know each other." Sable stared at him longer than she intended. "Why don't you hate me?" she asked quietly. Bowden shrugged. "I never met you. Why should I hate someone I never met?" Something fragile cracked inside her chest. She turned to Elias and asked, "And the board?" Elias exhaled like he'd been holding that question for years. "The third branch has been meeting quietly," he admitted. "They've been close to the late chairman's brother, Hale Varick." Sable leaned in just enough to make him shrink. "Hale Varick," she repeated, tasting the name. "So the vultures were already eating before the funeral." Elias nodded, miserable. "Yes, ma'am." The boy climbed into the car beside her, completely at ease, unaware that the woman sitting next to him ruled underground networks across continents. "Dad's been sick," Bowden added. "Uncles always fought him. I heard them shouting. They said he was old. They said his time was up. And then, he wasn't here anymore." Sable's eyes darkened. "That's what you heard?" she asked. Bowden nodded. Sable stood. "Good," she said. Elias looked confused. "Good?" Sable's voice was flat. "Now I know where to start." She glanced down at Bowden. "You stay behind me," she told him. Bowden puffed his chest. "No, I stay in front of you." Sable paused. Then, without emotion, she said, "Fine. But if you get hurt, I'll burn this place down." Bowden smiled like that was the warmest promise he'd ever heard. The Hartwell mansion was louder than grief. People wore black, but their eyes were bright, not with mourning, with hunger. Sable walked in like she owned the air. Whispers chased her from doorway to doorway. "Is that her? She came back? The bastard daughter?" Bowden clung to her side like a shadow. At the front of the room stood Maris Hartwell, Bowden's mother. Stiff-backed, jaw clenched, eyes raw from crying and something else. When she saw Sable, her grief curdled into fury. "Oh," Maris said, voice shaking. "You actually showed up." Sable's expression didn't change. Maris stepped closer. "Don't come here with fake tears. Don't pretend. You just want to bully widows." Sable leaned in, voice low. "And you just wanted my father to replace my mother." Maris flinched like she'd been hit. Bowden gasped. "Mom?" Maris snapped. "Bowden, stay out of it." Sable's gaze dropped to Bowden. "Do you want to stay out of it?" she asked. Bowden shook his head fiercely. "No, Dad said family stays together. He said he wronged you. He said he wanted to say sorry." Sable's eyes flickered, just once. Then she looked back at Maris. Your husband's apology arrived late, she said. But I'm here now, and from this moment on, the Hartwell family follows one rule. Maris scoffed. You? Giving rules? You're not even in the family book. Sable's voice stayed calm. Then you won't mind what's in the will. The lawyer cleared his throat with trembling hands. By the late Chairman Garrick Hartwell's final directive, he read, the controlling shares and executive authority are transferred to. The room leaned in. Sable Hartwell. A stunned silence. Then chaos. Voices exploded. She can't lead. She was exiled. She's not legitimate. This is insane. Sable didn't react. Bowden turned to her like she'd just performed magic. Sis, he whispered. So you really are the boss. Sable looked down at him. No, she said softly. I'm the problem. Then she lifted her chin and faced the room. If anyone here thinks my father's death was convenient, she said, speak now. People froze. That was the first time they realized she wasn't here for money. She was here for blood truth, and someone in that room looked away too quickly. Sable saw it. Not fear, not grief, guilt. And she understood something instantly. Garrick Hartwell wasn't just dead. He'd been removed. Money was the distraction. The company was the battlefield. But the real war? It was about what he hid and who wanted it first. That night, Sable didn't sleep. She walked the Hartwell halls like she was counting ghosts. At 2:17 a.m., Elias arrived at her door, pale. They're meeting, he whispered. The third branch, the board, in the old conference room. Sable's expression was empty. Good. Elias swallowed. Security needs keycards. Elias said it like it was an obstacle. Sable heard it like it was a joke. Because she hadn't survived overseas by asking for permission. She survived by learning where people never look. The blind spots, the quiet doors, the invisible routes. Elias didn't know who he was traveling with. Not yet. Sable stared at the cameras in the hallway. Elias, she said, what do you think I did overseas? He hesitated. I don't know. Sable stepped into the camera's blind spot like she'd practiced it 1,000 times. She didn't look back. Then watch, she said. When she reached the conference room, she didn't sneak in. She opened the door like she was late for her own meeting. Every head snapped toward her. A long table. Old men in dark suits. And at the far end, lounging like he belonged on a magazine cover, Hale Varick. Sharp smile, perfect hair, eyes like polished knives. Well, Hale said, delighted. Look who crawled back from exile. Sable walked to the table, placed both hands on it, and leaned in. You're discussing my shares, she said. Hale grinned. We were discussing your future, which should be outside this family. An older man cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell, you're young. You're emotional. This company needs stability. Hale is capable, charming, experienced. Sable's eyes slid to him. You're Director Kensington, she said. The man stiffened. Yes? Sable's voice stayed flat. Your offshore accounts are in Belize. You move money through a shell called Silver Dune Consulting. You bought a condo downtown for a mistress named Vanessa with company funds. The room went dead. Kensington's face went pale. That's... Sable tilted her head. Say it's a lie. He couldn't. Hale's smile faded, just slightly. Sable looked around the table. You all took turns bleeding my father slowly, she said. You wore suits while you did it. You called it strategy. She slid a single paper across the table. A share transfer document. Sign, she said. Hale laughed. You're threatening the board? Sable's gaze didn't blink. I'm offering mercy. One of the men scoffed. And if we refuse? Sable leaned closer, voice quiet enough to feel like breath. When the incense at my father's funeral burns out, she said, your careers burn with it. Your freedom, too. Hale stood slowly. Big words, he said, but you're alone. A small voice cut through the air like a blade. She's not alone. Bowden, standing in the doorway, hands shaking, but eyes steady. Hale stared, surprised. Kid, you shouldn't be here. Bowden, he stepped forward, tiny shoulders squared, jaw trembling, eyes bright with stubborn courage, and stood between Sable and a room full of grown men. Don't touch my sister, he said. The word sister hit Sable like a slap. It wasn't just the word. It was the way he said it, like it was already true. Like he'd made a decision in his little 5-year-old heart. If the world was against her, he'd stand in front anyway. And that was the dangerous part. Because Sable could lose money. She could lose reputation. She could lose a company. But if she lost him, she would become the version of herself the underworld feared most. Because she hadn't come home for love. She came home because her father was dead, and the Hartwell family was already being carved up like a prize. And the people holding the knives were the same people who once called her a stain, a bastard, a mistake. Bowden looked up at her like he'd been waiting years. "If you bully my sister," Bowden said, I'll tell everybody you're bad." Some men chuckled. Sable didn't. She looked at Hale. "You hear him?" she asked. Hale's smile returned. Adorable. Then Hale's eyes hardened. "And now I'm going to show you what happens when you bring a child into adult fights." Sable's expression dropped into something colder than anger. They thought she was the girl they exiled. They didn't know she'd grown into something else, something the underworld whispered about. A name that didn't belong in family halls, a name that belonged at the top of the shadow list. And the moment they tried to hurt that little boy, they were going to learn what it meant to provoke a queen. "You touch him," she said, "and this becomes your last meeting." The next morning, the Hartwell funeral wasn't a funeral. It was a statement. The chapel was beautiful. White flowers, dark wood, stained glass, but the seats were empty. No board members, no uncles, no family unity. Just Sable, Maris, Bowden, Elias, and a handful of loyal staff. Maris stared at the emptiness like it was a second death. "They blocked it," she whispered. "Hale told people if they show up, they're done." Hale wasn't just disrespecting a funeral. He was sending a message. Your grief doesn't matter. Your title doesn't matter. Even your dead don't matter. And that told Sable the truth, clean and clear. Hale wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to erase a family, piece by piece. Bowden's small hand clenched into a fist. Sable stood before her father's closed casket. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. But when she placed her palm on the wood, her fingers lingered, like she was trying to feel the truth through the barrier. Maris stepped closer, voice breaking. He wasn't perfect, but he tried at the end. Sable's voice was low. Trying at the end doesn't erase the beginning. Then she turned. "Elias," she said. "Where's the company seal?" Elias hesitated. "It vanished after he died." Sable's eyes narrowed. "Vanished?" Maris swallowed. "Some people say Hale believes the seal was hidden with your father." Sable's jaw tightened. "Meaning," she said, "someone took my father." The room felt colder. Bowden's eyes widened. "They took Dad?" Sable crouched in front of him. "Listen to me," she said. "No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, you stay behind me." Bowden nodded fast. Sable stood. Her voice turned steel. "Now we go find the man who thinks he can steal bodies," she said. "And we remind him who he's dealing with." Rook Hartwell's penthouse smelled like expensive alcohol and bad decisions. Music thumped. Women laughed. Security tried to block Sable at the door until she looked at them. Not a threat. Not a scream. Just a look. They moved like their bones remembered fear. Upstairs, Rook was half sprawled on a couch like a king of nothing. When he saw Sable, his grin was sloppy. Well, he slurred. "Look who's back, Miss Exile." Bowden stepped forward. "Rook," Bowden said. "Where's Dad?" Rook froze, just for half a second. Then he scoffed. "Ask Hale." Sable walked closer. "Where's my father?" she said. Rook sat up, eyes glossy. "I didn't take him." Sable's voice stayed calm. "Then you know who did." Rook swallowed. "It was Hale," he muttered. "The seal is missing. He thought Dad hid it, so he took the body." Maris let out a strangled sound. Bowden's face crumpled. Sable's eyes went sharp. "And you," she said to Rook, "let him." Rook snapped, defensive. "You think I had a choice? Hale's got Crimson Worm backing him." Sable's expression didn't move, but the air changed. "Crimson Worm," she repeated. Rook nodded fast. "They're real. People disappear. Businesses vanish overnight. Hale's godfather runs them." Bowden's little voice trembled. "Sis?" Sable looked down at him. Then she looked back at Rook. "You brought danger into this family," she said, "because you wanted a seat at a table you didn't earn." Rook flinched. "I saved us. Hale promised he wouldn't touch us again." Sable stepped closer until Rook's back hit the couch. "Rook," she said, almost gentle, "you don't know what again means to people like him." Rook's bravado collapsed. "I didn't want this," he whispered. I didn't want to be nothing." Sable stared at him like she was reading a weak spot. Then suddenly she slapped him. Not brutal, just sharp, a wake-up slap. Rook stared, stunned. Sable's voice stayed cold. "You're not nothing." She pointed toward the door. "You're a liability," she said. "And if you want to stay in this family, you start acting like family." Rook swallowed. "What do you want?" Sable's eyes narrowed. I want Hale Varick, she said, and I want my father back where he belongs. The board meeting was scheduled for noon, but the building felt like midnight. Security lines, cameras, journalists, men in suits pretending they weren't afraid. Sable walked in with Bowden holding her hand. Maris followed, trembling but proud. Hale Varick stood at the front, smiling like he owned the world. Miss Hartwell, he said warmly like an uncle, glad you came. Sable's eyes scanned the room. Board members, shareholders, and in the corners, men who didn't belong. Too still, too alert. Crimson Worm muscle. Hale spread his arms. Let's be civilized. The Hartwell Empire needs leadership, not chaos. Sable's voice was quiet. You stole my father's body. Hale's smile didn't break. Careful, he said. Accusations need proof. Sable nodded slowly. You want proof? She asked. Hale leaned forward. I want you to understand something. He gestured. And two Crimson Worm enforcers stepped out like shadows. Their presence made the room tighten. Hale's voice was smooth. The underworld has rules. Hurt Crimson Worm and families vanish. Maris grabbed Bowden tighter. Bowden tried to stay brave, but his lips trembled. Sable looked at the enforcers like they were dust. Then she spoke. Your mistake, she said, is thinking you're the only monster in the room. Hale chuckled. Oh, and what are you? Sable's eyes lifted. The reason they made a list, she said, and for the first time, Hale's smile slipped. Because somewhere deep inside him, a rumor was waking up. A rumor with a name he didn't want to be real. Hale's eyes went to Bowden. And Sable saw it. That calculating pause. That predator's decision. Hale smiled again, slow and cruel. Let's make this simple, he said. You sign over your authority, and your little brother goes home safe. Maris inhaled sharply. Don't you? A Crimson Worm man stepped closer to Bowden. Bowden stiffened. Sable's hand tightened around his. The man reached. Bowden flinched, but he didn't run. He looked up at Sable, and he whispered, Sis, I'm not scared. That sentence almost broke her. Because he was 5, and he was trying to protect her. Sable's voice stayed calm, too calm. Move your hand, she told the man. He smirked. Or what? Sable's eyes didn't blink. Or you'll learn, she said, what real power feels like. Hale laughed. You're in Chicago, Sable. Not wherever you were playing warrior overseas. You can't do anything here. Cameras are rolling. You touch anyone and you go to prison. Sable nodded slowly. Then she looked toward the ceiling corner. A tiny black dome. A security camera. She spoke as if she was talking to the camera itself. Director Rowland, she said quietly. You getting this? Silence. Hale frowned. What are you talking about? A voice came through the room's speaker system, flat, official, deadly calm. Crystal clear, Miss Hartwell. Hale's face changed, not fear yet, but confusion. Sable stepped forward. Hale snapped. Who wired my building? Sable's eyes turned ice. You, she said. You just didn't know it. And that was the moment Hale realized this wasn't a girl throwing a tantrum for inheritance. This was a trap. And he'd walked into it because he underestimated a woman, and because he thought a child was a weakness. He was wrong, because Bowden wasn't just a child. He was the fuse. The double doors at the back of the hall slammed open. Men in tactical gear filed in, disciplined, silent, official, not gangsters, not private security. Dragon Division. The room erupted into panic. Board members stood, shouting. Hale backed away slowly. Maris clutched Bowden. Bowden stared like he'd just seen superheroes. Director Dax Rowland stepped forward, badge visible, eyes hard. He looked at Sable, respect in his gaze. Then he turned to Hale. Hale Varick, Rowland said. You are under investigation for fraud, coercion, intimidation, and conspiracy tied to the death of Garrick Hartwell. Hale barked a laugh, too forced. You don't have proof, he snapped. You can't arrest me. Rowland lifted a small evidence bag. Inside, an encrypted drive. We have plenty, Rowland said. Hale's eyes flashed. Then he shouted, Crimson Worm. 2 enforcers moved. Sable's head turned slightly, just slightly, and the enforcers froze, like their bodies remembered her name before their brains caught up. Rowland stared at Sable. You sure you want to keep going? He asked quietly. Sable looked down at Bowden. Bowden's eyes were wet, but he stood tall. Sable turned back. Her voice was calm as a closing door. I'm just getting started, she said. And somewhere far away, someone powerful felt the shift. Because when the Dragon Division moves, the underworld moves too. And the Crimson Worm Hall was about to respond with its true master. Chaos exploded inside the boardroom. Board members shouted. Phones came out. Security scrambled. Hale Varick's face twisted between rage and panic. You think this changes anything? He snapped at Sable. Crimson Worm doesn't answer to your badge, boys. Director Roland didn't flinch. Crimson Worm answers to the law, he said flatly. Hale laughed bitterly. You're dreaming. But his eyes darted toward the exits. He was calculating. Escape routes, timing, risk. And that's when the lights cut out. The room plunged into darkness. Screams broke out. Glass shattered. Someone shouted, "Gun!" Bowden gasped and buried his face into Sable's coat. Sable's hand wrapped around him instantly. Her voice was low and steady. Don't move. Emergency lights flickered on in red streaks. In the chaos, a body slammed onto the conference table. A man lay still, blood spreading beneath him. A board member screamed, "He's dead!" Cameras swung toward Sable instinctively. Someone shouted, "She did it! She threatened him!" Hale's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Arrest her," he yelled. "She warned us. She said people would burn." Roland froze. Every eye turned to Sable. Maris clutched Bowden tighter, trembling. Sable, the dead man was one of Hale's own associates, shot execution style, and positioned perfectly. Like a gift. A setup. Sable stared at the body, her jaw tightened, not in fear, in recognition. "They're framing me," she said quietly. Roland hesitated. His men hesitated. This was the moment Crimson Worm wanted. Confusion. Public pressure. A scandal that could swallow truth. Cameras were already streaming. Hale lifted his hands dramatically. "Look at her face. Cold. No remorse. This is what monsters look like." Sable's eyes lifted slowly. They locked onto Hale. "You just signed your own warrant," she said. Hale sneered. "Take her away." Roland's hand hovered near his radio. His instincts screamed wrong, but the optics were brutal. A dead body. Threats on record. Witnesses screaming. Then a calm voice echoed through the speakers again. "Director Roland," the voice said, "do not touch her." Roland froze. "That voice," someone whispered. The voice continued, calm and precise. "Playback camera 7. Infrared overlay. 30 seconds before blackout." The screens behind the board flickered. Footage rewound, then played. A shadow moving across the ceiling beams. A suppressed muzzle flash. A sniper angle. The shooter wasn't near Sable. He was above them. A hired kill. Perfectly staged. The room went silent. Hale's face drained of color. Roland exhaled slowly. "That's enough," he said. He looked straight at Hale. "You're done." Hale backed away, stumbling, but his smile returned, twisted and confident. "You think that stops Crimson Worm?" he spat. "You think you scared my godfather?" Sable's eyes turned distant. "No," she said. "I'm about to wake him." That night, Chicago felt heavier, like the city itself was holding its breath. Sable stood on the mansion balcony watching the skyline. Bowden slept on the couch behind her, wrapped in a blanket, toy airplane clutched in his fist. Maris watched Sable from the doorway. "You're not just fighting greedy men," Maris said quietly. "You're fighting something darker." Sable nodded. "I know." Maris hesitated. "Then why stay?" Sable didn't look away from the city, because monsters don't stop unless someone becomes bigger than them. Her phone buzzed. One message. "Unknown, the Crown wishes to speak. Midnight, Pier 17, come alone." Sable stared at the words. Her expression didn't change, but the air around her shifted. Maris sensed it instantly. "Who is it?" Sable's voice dropped. "The real head of Crimson Worm." Maris paled. "You can't go alone." Sable turned. Her eyes softened slightly when they landed on Bowden. "I won't bring him into this," she said. Midnight. Pier 17 was empty except for fog and cold steel. A single luxury car waited. A man stepped out, tall, elegant, mid-40s, silver hair, expensive coat, eyes like polished stone. He smiled warmly. "Sable Hartwell," he said. "Or should I say, Glass Sovereign." The name rippled through the air like thunder. Sable's gaze hardened. "You shouldn't use that name," she said. The man bowed slightly. "My apologies," he said. "But legends deserve proper titles." He walked closer. "I am Victor Crown," he said. "Founder of Crimson Worm." Sable's voice was cold. "Your people killed my father." Victor's smile faded. "Not intentionally," he said. Hale exceeded instructions. Sable's eyes sharpened. "You still empowered him." Victor nodded slowly. "True, which is why I'm here to offer peace." Sable didn't blink. Victor extended a folder. "Walk away from the Hartwell War," he said. "Take your brother, leave Chicago, I'll erase your enemies." Sable stared at the folder. Then she laughed softly. "You think this is about business?" she asked. Victor studied her. "This is about blood," she said, "and justice." Victor's gaze hardened. "You're making enemies you cannot outlive." Sable stepped closer. "So are you." Silence stretched. Fog rolled between them. Victor finally sighed. Then we're on opposite sides. Sable nodded. Yes, she said. Now you understand. Morning exploded with headlines. Hartwell heiress linked to underworld power. Mysterious figure connected to boardroom violence. Who is the glass sovereign? Cameras flooded the mansion gates. Reporters shouted. Drones hovered. The narrative was being twisted. Crimson Worm was feeding the press selective leaks, anonymous sources, fake financial trails, rumors. Roland warned Sable. They're trying to bury you in perception. Sable nodded calmly. Good, she said. Let them gather everyone. She scheduled a press conference. Live, unfiltered, nationwide. The room filled with cameras. Journalists sharpened their questions like knives. Sable stepped to the podium alone. Maris and Bowden watched from the side. A reporter shouted, Are you the criminal known as the Glass Sovereign? Another yelled, Did you orchestrate the boardroom killing? Another screamed, Are you tied to organized crime? Sable raised her hand. Silence fell. I didn't come here to defend rumors, she said calmly. I came to expose truth. She nodded toward the screen behind her. Play file 1. Video appeared. Hale meeting Crimson Worm intermediaries, wire transfers, bribery logs, illegal asset seizures. File 2. Hospital footage. A shadow entering her father's ICU room. Life support disconnected. Timestamp proof. The room gasped. Maris collapsed into a chair. File 3. Audio recordings. Threats, extortion, plans to seize the Hartwell Company. The press erupted. Sable leaned forward slightly. My father didn't die from illness, she said. He was murdered. Silence gripped the room. And the people responsible are hiding behind corporate titles and criminal networks. A reporter whispered, This changes everything. Sable finished calmly. Justice doesn't hide forever, she said. Neither do queens. That night, Crimson Worm retaliated. Power grids failed, roads blocked, signal jammers activated. The mansion fell into darkness. Security scrambled. Maris hugged Bowden tightly. Sable stood in the hallway like a statue. They're coming, Elias whispered. Sable nodded. Footsteps thundered outside. Doors shattered. Masked men poured in. But they didn't last long. Lights flickered back on. Sirens echoed. Dragon Division flooded the grounds. Crimson Worm's men dropped one by one. Victor Crown's voice came through Sable's phone. You forced my hand, he said coldly. Sable walked forward calmly. So did you. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. They're arresting my people, Victor said quietly. You planned this. Sable's voice was steady. You walked into it. Victor exhaled slowly. Then the war ends here, he said. Sable replied simply. It does. Weeks later, the Hartwell estate felt peaceful again. Board corruption dismantled, Crimson Worm assets seized, Victor Crown imprisoned, the company stabilized. Maris smiled more. Elias slept better. Bowden ran freely through the halls. One afternoon, Bowden tugged Sable's sleeve. Sis, he asked, are you really a queen? Sable knelt beside him. Do you want me to be? She asked. Bowden grinned. Yeah, queens protect people. Sable smiled faintly. Then maybe, she said. Bowden hugged her tight. Maris watched them from the doorway with tears in her eyes. The Hartwell family wasn't perfect, but it was whole. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. For the first time in months, silence returned to the Hartwell estate. No sirens, no boardroom shouting, no threats whispered in the dark. Morning sunlight filled the halls. Bowden chased his toy plane across the marble floor, laughing freely. Maris watched from the kitchen doorway, smiling softly. For a moment, the family felt normal again. Sable stood by the window, coffee untouched. She wasn't relaxed. She was listening. Every instinct trained for danger. Elias approached quietly. You should rest, he said. The city's quiet. Sable shook her head. Quiet doesn't mean safe. As if summoned by her words, her phone vibrated. Encrypted signal. Unknown channel. One sentence appeared on screen. The glass throne is empty. Claim it or be consumed. Sable's fingers tightened around the phone. Her past was calling again. The world she buried was waking up. Elias studied her face. Who sent that? Sable exhaled slowly. Someone who knows what I used to be, she said. 3 days later, Dragon Division security rotated guards around the estate. New faces, new protocols, new vulnerabilities. One guard stood out. Quiet, polite, always early. Name, Aaron Pike. He brought tea for Maris every morning, helped Bowden with puzzles, earned trust fast. Too fast. Sable noticed. Trust built quickly usually meant intent hidden deeply. She flagged him mentally. That night, motion sensors tripped near the west wing. Sable moved silently through the corridor. She saw Pike slipping into the communications room, planting something. A signal relay. A beacon. Her voice cut through the dark. Step away from the panel. Pike froze, slowly turned. His eyes were calm, too calm. You're sharper than expected, he said softly. Who sent you? Sable asked. Pike smiled thinly. Not Crimson Worm. He raised his hands peacefully. You can kill me, he said, but the signal already transmitted. Sable's eyes narrowed. To who? Pike leaned closer. To the ones who built you. Then he triggered a capsule in his mouth. Poison. He collapsed instantly. Sable knelt beside him, too late. A chill crawled up her spine. The ones who built her. Her past wasn't buried. It was hunting her. The next morning came too quiet, too clean. Birds chirped, sunlight glowed. Security systems reported green across all sectors. Too perfect. Sable felt it immediately. Something was wrong. She sprinted toward the courtyard. Maris was screaming. Bowden was gone. His toy plane lay shattered near the fountain. Footprints led to the hedge line. Sable's chest tightened. Her breathing sharpened. Her voice dropped into pure steel. Lock the estate, she ordered. Drones launched, cameras scanned, thermal imaging activated. A van was already speeding away. Sable didn't hesitate. She grabbed keys. Engine roared. Tires screamed. The chase tore through side streets. Traffic blurred. Sirens wailed. Sable pushed harder. She clipped the van's rear bumper. The van fishtailed, crashed into a barrier. Armed men poured out. Gunfire erupted. Sable moved like a storm. 1 down, 2 down, 3 down. She ripped open the van doors. Bowden was inside, tied, trembling. Sis, he cried. She cut the ropes instantly and pulled him into her arms. Her hands shook slightly for the first time. Not fear. Rage barely contained. Her voice softened. You're okay? Bowden clung to her. I wasn't scared, he whispered. I knew you'd come. Sable closed her eyes briefly. Someone had crossed the final line. That night, Sable received another transmission. Video feed opened automatically. A dark room. 3 silhouettes seated behind a glass table. One voice spoke. Glass Sovereign, the voice said. You were never meant to retire. Another voice continued. We built you. Trained you. Sharpened you. The third voice added quietly. And now you belong to us again. Sable's face hardened. The architects, she said. A global covert syndicate. Invisible. Untraceable. Responsible for creating elite operatives worldwide. They had trained her years ago, before she escaped, before she became human again. You kidnapped my brother, Sable said coldly. A soft laugh echoed. Correction, the voice replied. We tested your emotional vulnerability. Sable's jaw tightened. You failed, she said. On the contrary, they replied. You passed. You reacted exactly as predicted. They leaned forward slightly. Return to us, they said. Reclaim your throne, or we dismantle everything you love. Silence stretched. Sable's eyes burned. You don't own me, she said. The screen cut. War had just been declared. Maris begged Sable to disappear. To protect Bowden, she said. Run, please. Elias urged relocation, witness protection, new identities, new lives. Sable listened. Then she shook her head. They won't stop, she said. Running teaches predators to chase harder. Bowden looked up at her. Sis, are you going to fight bad people again? Sable knelt in front of him. Yes, she said gently. So you never have to. Bowden nodded seriously. Then I'll be brave, he said. Her heart tightened. This wasn't the world she wanted for him. But it was the one she had to protect him from. Sable made a decision. She would end the architects permanently, even if it meant reopening the darkest chapter of her life. Sable activated a secure broadcast, encrypted across underworld networks. One message only. The Glass Sovereign returns. The response was immediate. Fear rippled across hidden channels. Old enemies stirred. Old allies surfaced. Legends resurfaced. The name carried weight, power, history. Elias watched in awe. You're waking the whole world, he said. Sable replied calmly. Good, let them remember who I am. Her voice lowered. Because this time, I finished the story. The city slept under a thin layer of fog. Lights shimmered like distant stars. Above the skyline, a private cargo tower stood silent. Abandoned, officially, unofficially, it was now alive with movement. The architects had summoned Sable there. They believed they were the hunters. They did not realize they had become the bait. Sable stood on a neighboring rooftop, wine tugging at her coat. Below her, silent drones glided into position. Dragon Division units sealed every underground route. Satellite interference blanketed the airspace. Elias monitored feeds from a mobile command vehicle. All teams ready, he said quietly. Sable's eyes remained fixed on the tower. Let them walk into their own grave. She stepped forward. One leap carried her across the gap. She landed soundlessly inside the tower's upper level. Dark corridors stretched endlessly. Motion sensors pulsed faint red. The building breathed with hidden machines. Her past training awakened. Every step calculated. Every breath controlled. The first trap triggered. Laser grid ignited. Sable rolled, slid under beams, vaulted walls. Second trap. Pressure plates. Explosive darts fired. She twisted midair, caught one dart, snapped it, kept moving. These are their sentinels, Elias whispered through comms. Sable deactivated comms. This was personal. The sentinels attacked simultaneously. Blades flashed. Shockwaves cracked the air. Sable met them head-on. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. One sentinel flew backward into a pillar. The second swept low. Sable vaulted, spun, crushed its helmet. The third adapted instantly. Changed pattern. Faster, stronger, predictive. It landed a blow against Sable's ribs. Pain flashed. She staggered half a step. Then her eyes hardened. Wrong move. She grabbed the sentinel mid-strike, used its momentum, slammed into the floor. Hard. The chamber fell silent, breathing steady, heart calm. The path was open. At the core chamber, glass walls glowed faintly. 3 figures stood behind reinforced barriers, faces now visible. Not monsters, not warlords, ordinary men. Scientists, strategists, architects of human weapons. You survived, one said calmly. We expected nothing less. Sable stared at them, cold. You trained children to become weapons, she said. You erased their names, their memories. Another replied evenly. We created stability through controlled power. You created monsters, Sable said. We created you. Silence settled. You escaped, the third said, but you never stopped being ours. Sable stepped closer. You lost ownership the day I learned how to feel. The glass barriers began retracting. They stepped forward confidently. You won't kill us, one said. You're not that person anymore. Sable's eyes darkened. No, she said. I'm worse. She moved. In 3 seconds, all 3 collapsed. Non-lethal strikes. Paralyzed, helpless. She leaned down slowly. You don't deserve death, she whispered. You deserve to live powerless. She activated restraints. Authorities were already inbound. The architects were finished. Sable almost believed it. 3 men, 3 arrests, a clean ending. But the architects were never the kind of system that died when you cut off the face. Systems like that had something worse than leaders. They had teachers. And Sable had only ever feared one teacher. Alarms suddenly blared. Elias shouted through comms. Sable. New heat signature. Underground elevator activated. The floor split open. A massive platform rose. A single figure stood upon it. Tall, calm, unarmed. His presence bent the air. Sable's expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Arden Vale, she said quietly, her former mentor, the man who trained her hardest, the one who taught her mercy and brutality. You came, Arden said softly. Good. You're behind this, Sable said. I always was, he replied. The true mastermind. The final ghost. You use the architects as shields, she said. Arden nodded. Necessary tools. He studied her with quiet pride. You surpassed everything I built. Then step aside, Sable said. Arden shook his head gently. I can't. They faced each other in silence. Teacher, student, both knowing only one would walk away. No countdown, no warning. They moved simultaneously. Shockwaves cracked concrete. Their strikes blurred faster than cameras could track. Arden anticipated her movements. She countered instantly. Years of shared instincts clashed violently. They crashed through pillars. Steel beams bent. Glass exploded. Arden landed a heavy strike. Sable rolled but recovered instantly. You've grown stronger? Arden admitted. You taught me well, Sable replied. They collide again, fist against fist, momentum ripping air apart. Arden shifted tactics. Mental pressure. Psychological warfare. You can't protect everyone, he said. You'll always lose something. Sable's eyes burned. I choose what I lose. She unleashed full force. A final sequence of strikes. Perfect, precise, overwhelming. Arden staggered, knee hit the ground, breathing heavy. He looked up at her. Pride mixed with sadness. You've surpassed me, he whispered. Sable held her strike, then lowered her fist. No, she said quietly. I outgrew you. She struck once. Arden collapsed unconscious, alive. Defeated. The cycle was broken. Authorities secured the tower. Dragon Division arrested the remaining network. International warrants issued. The architects exposed globally. Arden imprisoned under maximum security. The shadow network collapsed overnight. News spread like wildfire. But Sable stayed out of the spotlight. She returned home quietly. Bowden ran into her arms. "You came back," he said proudly. Sable smiled softly. "Always." Maris embraced them both. Tears fell freely. For the first time, safety felt real. Weeks later, Hartwell Group stabilized. Bowden officially remained chairman in name. Sable oversaw quietly, ethical reforms implemented, charities funded, education programs launched. Sable stood once more by the window, but this time her coffee was warm. Elias joined her. "You could rule the world," he said. She smiled faintly. "I already did. I just chose peace instead." Bowden ran in laughing. "Sis, come play." Sable knelt and hugged him. The queen laid down her crown, not in weakness, but in victory. For the first time in months, silence returned to the Hartwell estate. No sirens, no boardroom shouting, no threats whispered in the dark. Morning sunlight spilled across marble floors like the house was trying to pretend it had never seen blood money or betrayal. Bowden raced his toy plane down the hallway, laughing, free, bright, 5 years old and untouched by the weight of grown men's wars. Maris watched him from the kitchen doorway, the first real smile she'd worn in weeks, trembling on her lips. Elias stood near the staircase, still tense, still scanning corners like danger might step out of the wallpaper. "You should rest," he told Sable quietly. "The city's quiet." Sable didn't move from the window. Her coffee sat untouched in her hand, cooling, forgotten. "Quiet doesn't mean safe," she said. She wasn't watching the skyline for beauty. She was listening. Every instinct she'd ever buried. Awake again. Then her phone vibrated, not a normal notification, an encrypted pulse, a channel she hadn't opened in years. One sentence appeared on the screen. Sable's fingers tightened around the phone. Elias noticed immediately. "Who sent that?" Sable exhaled slowly, eyes still on the city. "Someone who knows what I used to be," she said. And with those words, the peace inside the Hartwell estate cracked, quietly, like thin ice. 3 days later, Dragon Division rotated security around the estate. New faces, new protocols, new chances for the wrong person to slip in. One guard stood out, quiet, polite, always early. Name? Aaron Pike. He brought tea to Maris every morning like he was born to serve the household. He helped Bowden with puzzles, kneeling beside him on the floor like he had all the patience in the world. He earned trust fast, too fast. Sable didn't say anything at first, she just watched. Because trust that grows overnight usually has a hook buried in it. That night, motion sensors tripped near the west wing. Sable moved down the corridor without a sound. She reached the communications room and saw him, Pike, slipping inside like he belonged there. His hands were at the panel. Wires. A small device no security upgrade had requested. A relay. A beacon. Sable's voice cut through the dark. "Step away from the panel." Pike froze. Then he turned slowly, calm as if she'd just caught him pouring a drink. "You're sharper than expected," he said. "Who sent you?" Sable asked. Pike's mouth curved into something thin and satisfied. "Not Crimson Worm." He raised his hands, peaceful. "You can kill me," he said, but the signal already transmitted. Sable's eyes narrowed. "To who?" Pike leaned in like he couldn't resist delivering the last line. "To the ones who built you." Sable's chest went cold. Then Pike's jaw tightened like he'd bitten down on something. He dropped fast, too fast. Sable grabbed him, checked him. But the life was already gone. Elias rushed in, horrified. "What happened?" Sable stared at Pike's empty eyes. Her voice was flat. "The past," she said. And for the first time since she'd returned to Chicago, Sable Hartwell looked like she'd just heard a door open behind her. The next morning was wrong. Not loud wrong, not obvious wrong. It was clean, bright, normal, too normal. Security reports showed green across all sectors. No breaches, no unusual movement, no threats. Sable felt it anyway. She moved faster than the cameras could track, down the corridor and into the courtyard. And the moment she stepped outside, Maris's scream ripped through the air. Sable's head snapped. Maris was standing near the fountain, shaking. Her hands were over her mouth like she was trying to stop the world from breaking. Sable's eyes dropped. Bowden's toy plane lay shattered on the stone, and Bowden was gone. For one heartbeat, Sable didn't breathe. Then her voice turned into steel. "Lock the estate." Guards moved, gates sealed, drones launched into the sky, cameras rewound, thermal imaging activated. Elias ran to her side. "Sable, there's a vehicle already leaving the perimeter road. A van. Speeding." Sable didn't hesitate. She grabbed keys, got into the car, and the engine roared like something angry waking up. Maris tried to follow, frantic. "Sable, please." Sable didn't look back. She only said one thing, softly, like a promise meant for Maris and for whoever took Bowden. "I'm bringing him home." The van tore through side streets, weaving traffic like it didn't fear consequences. Sable drove like consequences were her specialty. She closed the distance, clipped the van's rear. The van fishtailed, slammed into a barrier, and spun to a stop. Armed men poured out. They raised weapons, but Sable moved first, fast, precise. She didn't waste time with speeches. One man dropped, another stumbled back, a third turned to run, then realized there was nowhere to run. Sable yanked open the van doors, and there he was, Bowden, tied, trembling, eyes wide. The moment he saw her, his voice broke. "Sis!" Sable cut the ropes in a blink and pulled him into her arms. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, from rage contained so tightly it could have shattered bone. "You're okay," she whispered. Bowden clung to her coat. "I wasn't scared," he said, voice small but stubborn. "I knew you'd come." Sable closed her eyes for half a second. Somewhere inside her chest, something human tried to cry. Something older tried to burn the whole city down. She opened her eyes again. Calm returned to her face like a mask snapping into place. Because whoever did this hadn't just kidnapped a child. They'd tested a queen. And they'd just learned what happens when a queen stops being polite. That night, another transmission arrived. The screen turned on by itself. A video feed. A dark room. 3 silhouettes seated behind a glass table like judges in a court that didn't exist. One voice spoke first. Smooth, controlled. "Glass sovereign," it said. "You were never meant to retire." Another voice continued, colder. "We built you, trained you, sharpened you." The third voice added quietly, almost amused. "And now you belong to us again." Sable didn't blink. Her voice came out like ice. "The architects." Elias, standing behind her, went pale. "Who are they?" Sable's eyes stayed locked on the screen. "A ghost network," she said. "They don't run gangs. They don't run companies. They run people." The first voice leaned forward slightly. "You have something we need," it said. Sable's jaw tightened. "You kidnapped my brother." A soft laugh. "Correction," the voice replied. "We tested your emotional vulnerability." Sable's fingers curled. "You failed." "On the contrary," the voice said, "you reacted exactly as predicted." Then the last line landed like a blade. "Return to us, reclaim your throne, or we dismantle everything you love." The screen cut to black. Silence filled the room. Maris stood trembling in the doorway. Elias whispered, "We can run. Witness protection, new names, new lives." Sable turned slowly, and the calm on her face was terrifying. "They won't stop," she said. "Running teaches predators to chase harder." Bowden, still wrapped in his blanket, peeked over the couch. "Sis, are you gonna fight bad people again?" Sable walked to him and knelt. Her voice softened. "Yes." Bowden swallowed. "Because of me?" Sable touched his cheek gently. "Because of love," she said. "So you never have to." Bowden nodded as if he understood something older than 5 years. "Then I'll be brave," he said, and Sable's heart tightened, because she never wanted bravery to be his childhood. But now it had to be. Sable didn't call the police. She didn't call the board. She didn't call the press. She called the world she'd buried. She opened a secure channel that only the deadliest people still remembered. One message, encrypted across underworld networks. The response was immediate. Silence at first, then movement. Names surfaced from shadow channels. Old allies, old enemies, old debts. Elias watched the feeds in stunned disbelief. "You're waking the whole world," he said. Sable looked out at Chicago like it was just another territory on a map. "Good," she replied. "Let them remember who I am." She turned back, eyes dark, because this time, I finished the story. Above the skyline stood a private cargo tower, abandoned on record, alive in truth. The architects had chosen it as their stage. They believed they were the hunters. They didn't realize they'd become the bait. Sable stood on a neighboring rooftop, wind pulling at her coat like the city itself was trying to hold her back. Below, drones glided into position. Dragon divisions sealed underground routes. Signal interference blanketed the airspace. Elias's voice came through the comms. "All teams ready." Sable's eyes stayed fixed on the tower. "Let them walk into their own grave," she said. She moved. One leap, one landing. Inside, the tower was cold and mechanical. Corridors lit by faint red sensors, walls that felt like they remembered screams. Traps triggered. Laser grids, pressure plates, automated darts. Sable dodged them like she was running through old training, because she was. They weren't trying to stop her, they were testing her. She smiled faintly. "You'll need more than memories," she murmured. Then the steel doors opened. 3 figures waited in matte black armor, faces hidden behind glass masks. Perfect synchronization. Elias whispered, shaken, "Sentinels." Sable's jaw set. The Sentinels attacked. Fast, coordinated, brutal. Sable met them head-on. Metal clashed, glass cracked. One Sentinel flew back into a pillar. Another swept low. Sable vaulted. The third adapted instantly, faster, stronger, predictive. A hit landed against Sable's ribs. Pain flashed. She staggered half a step. Then her eyes hardened. "Wrong move," she said. She grabbed the Sentinel mid-strike and slammed it into the floor hard enough to end the fight. Silence returned. Sable's breathing stayed steady, because the real fight wasn't behind masks, it was behind glass. At the tower's core chamber, glass walls glowed faintly. 3 men stood behind reinforced barriers. Not warlords, not monsters with tattoos and guns, just ordinary men. Scientists, strategists, architects. One spoke calmly. "You survived," another nodded. "We expected nothing less." Sable stared at them like they were insects pretending to be gods. "You trained children to become weapons," she said. "You erased their names." One replied evenly. "We created stability through controlled power." "You created monsters," Sable said. "We created you." The barriers began retracting. They stepped forward, confident, smug. One smiled. "You won't kill us, you're not that person anymore." Sable's eyes darkened. "No," she said quietly, "I'm worse." She moved. Fast. Precise. In seconds, they were down. Not dead, not dramatic, just helpless, stripped of control. Sable leaned down close enough for them to feel her breath. "You don't deserve death," she whispered. "You deserve to live powerless." Elias's voice crackled through comms, urgent. "Sable, new heat signature. Underground elevator activated." The floor split open. A platform rose, and on it stood a single figure, tall, calm, unarmed, a presence that made even the air feel heavier. Sable's expression shifted. No surprise, recognition. "Arden Vale," she said softly, her former mentor, the man who trained her hardest, the man who taught her mercy and brutality. Arden looked at her like a proud teacher seeing the final exam. "You came," he said. Sable's voice went cold. "You were behind this." Arden nodded once. "I refined you," he replied. "The world finally sees what you became." And the last ghost of her past stepped forward into the light. The man who trained her when she had no name, when she was nothing but a means to an end. He studied her with quiet pride. Sable stepped forward. "I became human." Arden shook his head gently. "No, you became dangerous." They moved at the same time. Air shattered. Concrete cracked beneath their feet. Every strike was memory against memory. Every counter was years of shared training colliding violently. He anticipated her angles. She adapted faster. Steel beams bent from shockwaves. Glass exploded outward. Arden landed a heavy blow to her shoulder. Pain flared, but Sable didn't retreat. "You still hesitate," Arden said. "That makes you weak." Sable's eyes burned. "No," she said. "It makes me free." She unleashed a flawless sequence. Precision. Speed. Overwhelming force. Arden staggered, dropped to one knee, breathing hard. A faint smile crossed his face. "You surpassed me," he whispered. Sable lowered her stance. "No," she said quietly. "I outgrew you." One final strike. Arden collapsed, unconscious. Alive, defeated. The past was finished. Sirens echoed through the night. Dragon Division flooded the tower. The architects were arrested. Their servers seized. Their secrets decrypted. Within hours, the shadow network unraveled worldwide. Hidden accounts frozen. Smuggling routes exposed. Corrupt officials arrested. Crimson worm cells dismantled city by city. News spread like wildfire. A global criminal empire collapsed overnight. Markets stabilized. Governments moved. The invisible finally became visible. And at the center of it all, one name whispered across encrypted channels, the Glass Sovereign. But Sable didn't celebrate. She went home. Bowden ran into her arms. "You won," he said proudly. Sable held him tightly. "We're safe," she whispered. Maris cried quietly beside them. Elias watched in silence, finally breathing freely. The war was over. The world didn't need a queen anymore. Weeks later, the Hartwell estate felt alive again. Sunlight filled the halls. Laughter echoed instead of tension. Bowden raced his toy plane across the floor. Maris baked again. The house smelled like home. Sable stood by the window, not watching for threats anymore, just watching the morning light. Bowden tugged her sleeve. Sis, are you really a queen? She knelt beside him. Do you want me to be? Bowden grinned. Queens protect people? Sable smiled softly. Then maybe. He hugged her tightly. Maris wiped tears quietly from the doorway. The family wasn't perfect, but it was whole, and sometimes that's the greatest victory of all. Sable looked once more at the city skyline. The crown was gone, the war was finished, but her strength remained. Not as a weapon, not as a ruler, but as a sister, a protector, a survivor. And somewhere out there, powerful people would remember this day. The day they learned, never touch what belongs to a queen. Sable didn't lay down her crown because she was tired. She laid it down because she'd finally won the only war that mattered, the war over who she was allowed to be. Not their weapon, not their myth, not their property, just Sable. And the world would remember that lesson. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it becomes a sister and dares you to touch what she loves.